It's time for the WrestleCast on the Sportscast Media Network. Join us now for a discussion on wrestling at the high school and college levels. Here's Gaige Gill, Shane Barron, and Danny Davis.
Welcome to the WrestleCast. I'm Danny Davis. With me is Shane Barron and Gaige Gill. Guys, how you doing?
Doing well, Danny.
Doing great.
All right. Well, before we get on to wrestling talk, I wanted to just acknowledge Caitlin Clark. I don't have to go any further than that. Everybody knows that Caitlin Clark broke the all-time women's scoring record. Was you guys keeping track of that?
I want to bounce this off of you before we get too deep into the Caitlin Clark stuff. There's been some message board stuff going around. I've seen where they want to rename Highway 22 for her. Call that Caitlin Clark Highway. I've seen where they want to put a little star or emblem or logo on the very spot. I mean, I'm sure MediaCom people aren't too pleased with this idea, but they want to put a little something that will be permanent
on the court.
When you screw the nuts and bolts of the floor together, it'll just be one of those pieces, and an outline of her shoes that is like marked there permanently of where she launched that from, and what is it, like 38 feet from the basket. But is she our state's Taylor Swift? I mean,
I think she is.
If she said, I'm running for governor tomorrow, would she win? I think she would.
I think she would.
I think the only thing limiting her to that is the age requirements in the Constitution. I mean,
who will be the bigger Iowa icon, Dan Gable or Caitlin Clark by the time it's all said and done?
By the time it's all said and done,
I got to go with Caitlin.
I think Caitlin Clark is.
And she better get a statue.
Yeah. Oh,
because Gable has a sweet statue.
Yeah, I think.
So she better get a statue up next to him.
There's somebody probably purchasing bronze right now because Caitlin Clark's wishes are Iowa's demands.
Yeah.
She packs the seats. Yeah. I'm sure the NCAA is telling the Indiana Fever, why don't you just pick her anyway?
Yeah.
Like they did Larry Bird back in 1979. Just pick her anyway and she'll play for you next year.
Yeah.
But she might go to the WNBA just for peace and quiet.
Yeah. She'd play, probably for the Indiana Fever, and her boyfriend, maybe soon to be fiance or whatever, is he works for the Indiana Pacers. So that's McCaffrey. So that would be kind of a win-win situation for her. Mm-hmm. Or she said she could, I think it was on the Dan Patrick's, I forget what show. She's been on so many, but she said, or she could stay in Iowa, stay at Iowa one more year and get her master's degree and play basketball with her best friends for one more year.
I'd love to see her play another year at Iowa.
Regardless, it's going to be hard to let her go. Gaige, what say you? What do you think about Caitlin?
I saw the Jay Williams interview, or the show where he said she can't be one of the all-time greats if Iowa doesn't win a title. And I don't know, I'm going to tie this back to wrestling, but I was thinking about that over the weekend watching the state tournament, and you have some guys like Max Magana, who was going to be a four-timer, had never lost as an upperclassman, got upset in the semis, still one of the greatest wrestlers ever in the state of Iowa, but he won't be a four-timer, and so when you start arguing who's better, does the 4 titles versus the 3 titles, does that matter for who's better? I mean, that's where, does points matter? If you're on a crappy team but you score a bunch of points, which isn't Caitlin Clark at all, so what criteria, determines who is the best of all time or top 5 or whatever, so that's kind of what I've been getting into. And a lot of these analysts are kind of annoying to listen to.
Yeah.
Some are very pro Caitlin Clark, some are against it. I think regardless, I don't think we can argue that she's helped women's basketball and is exciting to watch.
Larry Bird is one of the greatest of all time. He played for Indiana State, and they didn't win a championship.
Right.
Karl Malone is one of the top 5 scorers of all time. Never won a championship. Stockton's another one in there. Never won a championship.
If you ever look it up on Google, and I did once, the amount of players that have Olympic gold medal, NCAA champion, and NBA champ, I think is only 6 people.
Yeah, say rare.
So it is such rare air.
You guys have point counterpoint, and Gaige, tell me what you guys are going to be talking about.
Okay, so first I want to throw out there that Iowa has a girls' union and a boys' association.
Why is that? That is strange.
They work together very closely for cross country and track and field, but then they compete against each other. They used to be together years ago. When did they split?
Yeah, I don't know.
15 years ago, maybe.
I'll have to plead the fifth on that.
Yeah. But they both, they both are profitable organizations, and so they kind of compete against each other. So the reason I bring this up, a lot of states with wrestling that have girls wrestling, they have boys and girls at the same state tournament. In Iowa, the girls, obviously we talked about that last episode, the girls have their own tournament. So boys have a 3-class tournament, 3 classes in Iowa, 24 wrestlers per class. Top 8 seeds get an opening round bye, and then it's basically double elimination, and you wrestle it out to 8 places. So our counterpoint is, what is the best state tournament format? And I'm just gonna pick one. I'm gonna say 1 class format is better than multiple class format, and then Shane's gonna counter me, I think.
All right, we'll give you both 30 seconds. And Gaige, do you want to go first?
Sure. All right. So here's why 1 class is better. You can have just 1 championship at a time, going at a time. You could have like 5th, 6th, 3rd on the side, but you could really blow up that one match. You could get better like stats and stuff like that on the TV side of it. You could have walkout music and fireballs and lights off and stuff like that. You could have the parents like mat side with. You could go bigger with 1 class, 1 weight at a time.
All right, Shane.
I'm going to go counterpoint with that and just say, from a tiny school, there's only 1 Hickory from Hoosiers. That kind of stuff doesn't happen too often. Your town has to have a little bit to put their hopes and dreams on. And if New London had to face Burlington or Ottumwa, I just think that would be too difficult for a small school to overcome.
Speaking of what small schools and big schools do and the formats and everything, what do other states do? How do they handle this?
So I went down a rabbit hole this week, guys. So New Jersey does a 32-man bracket, 1 division, 1 champion. Okay, so I'm just going to shout some of these out. I was just looking through there. Indiana does 1 class as well. Georgia does 7 classes, so 7 champions at each weight. Maryland splits public schools and private schools, and so they are completely split. So Tennessee does 3A, AA, and a private. So they have two leagues, and then they like 2 public schools. They split those in half, and then the privates are all in one, regardless of size. So Alabama, there's a state that does a 33-man bracket. There's states that do 40-man brackets. There's states that do 16. Colorado has 5 divisions and a girl divisions with it. Ohio has 4 and 16 people. Indiana does the same. So it's kind of all over the place as far as how many people and how many divisions. So I don't know. Take your pick. What do you guys think? If you had to, pick one of those.
Just some notes that I wrote down as you spoke. Georgia has 7 separate classes. Now, I could see 7 different size schools in Georgia. Is wrestling that big of a phenomenon in Georgia? It must be.
I mean, that's where Gabe Arnold came from, right? He came up from Georgia?
That's probably,
I
okay.
believe so. So I guess here's maybe a good way to compare. You look at some of the better wrestling states. So Pennsylvania, they have 2 divisions.
Mm-hmm.
They have AA and AAA. And I mean, if you think about Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and, all the population that they have, that's kind of crazy. The high school sports in Pennsylvania are wild. There's a stat that I saw during the Super Bowl to like the last 30 years, there's been at least 1 player in each Super Bowl that won or that played in a state championship game or won a state championship game out of Pennsylvania or something like that. So I don't know how you figure out what's best. Obviously all these states have different populations and, different amounts of private schools and all that. And like we talked about, their girls and boys unions are all one. So
what did you say, Oklahoma? Or do you know?
I don't think I threw Oklahoma out there. I don't think I found Oklahoma.
Oklahoma is one of those colleges that we were talking about, or state we were talking about here earlier before we started the broadcast, about it being a state along with Iowa that has so many other good wrestling colleges in it. With that, we're going down the rabbit hole and talking about colleges now. But go ahead, Shane.
No, the only thing, as we've talked about this, I'm thinking of Texas high school football, which is king, and they have 6-man football, 8-man football, A, double A, all the way up to 6A, which is divided into 2 separate sections, 5A, which is divided into 2 separate sections. But then again, it's Texas. It has schools that have got 40 kids in it and schools that have 4,000. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty hard for us Southeast Iowans to comprehend sometimes. But you can't argue with the fact that the stadiums are always full, and you can't decry the passion of it. I think Iowa does. I'm not sold on the 24 guys yet. If you wanted to sell me on big school, small school, in other words, A and double A, like Illinois basketball used to be A and double A, and it was pretty much the Chicago and East St. Louis teams versus some team that came along once in a while from a medium-sized population like Peoria. But anyway, I'll go with the I could go private school versus public school divisions.
So in Iowa, like Notre Dame goes with Danville and West Burlington, but there'd be a private school. So you got them. I mean, you'd have Don Bosco, Dowling, but Don Bosco, obviously a 1A powerhouse, Waterloo, Columbus, powerhouse, Assumption traditionally is very good. Regina, Heeland, Xavier, Des Moines Christian is a private school. They're not necessarily a wrestling powerhouse or anything. So I guess we didn't prep this, but 30-ish private schools, maybe 40. I don't know. It wouldn't be a huge, maybe there's 50 and there's a bunch of them we're not thinking of. I don't know, but there wouldn't be a ton.
So if you guys were the directors of these state championships, how would you run them? Gaige, start with you.
I'm with you, Shane. I don't really like the 24. I really like your counterpoint of the, like Southeast Polk has a huge wrestling room. They have 80 dudes. They have 10 coaches. New London, a Winfield, Mount Union. We could never have 10 coaches on staff. We couldn't pay 10 people to coach wrestling. So to say we got to go back and forth. But in wrestling, the nice thing about it is we weigh the exact same. Versus when you see 8-man football versus 5A football, the human bodies out there look different. But I'm going back to your 24. I don't like the 8 guys get a bye for what it does on the backside. It just, you have to wrestle back a million times. I wouldn't mind to see like 32 and go, if you're going to go 2 divisions, go 32 guys. Or if you're going to do 1 division, go 64 guys. Make it like the NCAA basketball tournament. And just get tons of people and wrestle every day. But I would say if you went at least 2 divisions, I think would be fair. And then if you have private schools, if you want to add a multiplier on them or something like that, I'd be fine with that. But I like 16 or 32. I'm not crazy about the 24. I don't like the first round bye for some of those guys.
Shane?
You've kind of made me think about my own thoughts a little bit. I'm going to go with, let's go as a proposal, 2 classes, A and double A, 32 kids, nobody gets a bye. We'll just go from there. I think that would eliminate some of the, now number 32 guy ranked in the seating probably is going to say to himself, okay, I'm going to get beat in the first round, but then, we'll see what happens after that.
Danny, can we add theatrics to this too?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Do you guys remember
I got sound effects too if you want to throw those in.
You guys remember like the Spencer Lee's mom videos for breaking her glasses?
Yeah.
Okay. So for each champion, how like they have a corner and everything. Yeah. Put like a couple chairs for the family of the champions where they walk out, they're out there. And so people can see You know, because think about how many times is there a championship match when it's like this guy's brother was a 2-timer and his dad was a 3-timer. Yeah. Then those people could be sitting mat side, you know, with the crazy wrestling mom. We mean that in a loving good way, you know. But how cool would that be? You put the family mat side, and I think I've said this every episode. Turn down the lights, give them a walkout song, and from your AD spot, Shane, you might not like this, but throw some fireballs out there, you know. At least like if you guys ever go have sushi. And they have the little torches where they like torch the top of like, you know, some of the fried stuff. At least give us some little torches, you know, or a junior high kid with an aerosol can and a lighter. I don't care.
Yeah, there we go.
You know, get us some flames out there. And I don't know. I think, and I love the girls, what they did where the bracket's sitting there and you sign it.
Oh, yeah.
Probably a little more logistics with 3 classes, but with 2 classes, you know, it wouldn't take all day to announce them, to do cool little stuff like that. Whereas when you have 3 matches, you got to kind of keep it moving or the finals are going to take 7 hours.
We talked about that on the previous episode about how the boys' meets could learn a lot from the girls' meets and the simplicity of the girls' meets and just having a better overall tournament and better entertainment value. You're talking about bringing out the parents, putting them under the spotlight, a little mini spotlight to the side while their wrestler is out there on the mat. And maybe have a screen somewhere where the audience can actually see the parents' reaction? I
think that'd be pretty cool.
Shane?
Well, I can't get past this lighting things on fire. I mean, I'm going to have to call State Farm or Farm Bureau and say, "What is this even possible?" I do want a good show. I think everything you're saying is right in tune of what the higher up administrator needs to think about, though. It's got to be a show now. People are watching WWE not because of the tremendous wrestling technique, because it's a show.
Yeah.
So they have to glitz it up a little bit. I wouldn't want the family members. There's family members that would see themselves in the spotlight and think it's their spotlight when it's not. And that could take you down a rabbit hole, I think. I do think the boys' wrestling tournament has to steal some stuff from the girls' wrestling tournament. They have to glam it up, I guess, in a little bit. Whether I don't want kids, you know, acting like Ric Flair all the time, but they've got to put on a better show. So you have to be a really sound wrestling technician. The wrestling administrators need to find ways to attract the casual fan, the people who watch in February, that follow this in February. The people who follow this year-round are going to do that no matter what they do. So I'm kind of an old school, you know, Rocky III Mr. T train with the ropes in the bottom of the basement with the beams type of guy, but not that I ever trained too hard, but you get where I'm coming from.
I do say in our hypothetical tournament that they definitely need to take, so hopefully we got some listeners at the athletic associations, do need to keep the Grand March. You know, they play the Olympic themed music and they have the little sticks with each weight class on them and do the little walk. I don't know. There's something special about that you know, if you make the stand that you're getting a walk out there, that's pretty cool.
Sorry, Dan, but I don't even know if they do this anymore. Do they still have on the state finals, the guys in the tuxedo sweep the floor one time in the basketball tournament? Do they still have that? The last time I showed some younger kids that little ceremony, they thought, well, that's stupid. I'm like, no, that's cool. So anything that we come up with is going to have that.
And going back to stuff like that with I know I keep coming back to the walkout song, but some of the timing was weird on some of these finals matches where the 2 wrestlers were ready, but the administrator and of the track wrestling and the refs weren't ready. And, you know, one of the cooler moments, there was a stare down for a while. Oh, I wrote it down somewhere. There was a stare down. I think it was between Ames and Southeast Polk at heavyweight. but the two guys were ready and they weren't ready for the match. And so they were just, as far as you and I are from each other, Shane, just absolutely staring at each other like they wanted to rip and eat each other's hearts out, and it was kind of cool. But at the same time, it was like, it'd be cool if they said your name, you ran out there and you wrestled, like the guys usually do their 2 little jumps, slap themselves somewhere, and then take like 6 aggressive steps, get in their stance, and then the whistle blows. It was like this weird, there's several matches like that where there's this weird pause where I think if you had like some intros, I mean, they obviously say their name, but make it a big deal.
So if, say I'm somebody looking outside the box, looking in, say I'm a grandparent or a father and my son is just getting into wrestling and I know nothing about it. How do you simplify, it sounds like the girls have something going with how they're running their meets. How do the boys, or maybe wrestling in general, how do you simplify it to help people understand what's going on, the point system, the moves? Because I think maybe that's one of the things that people don't gravitate towards wrestling because it's so hard to understand if you're not used to it or you didn't maybe grow up in that.
Well, Dan, you got a good question, and I wish I had a good answer. When you approached me about doing this broadcast, I kind of gave you a look like I don't think I know enough about wrestling for this, and there's probably some listeners out there that will say, yeah, he doesn't. But the point of this is there is folk style, there's freestyle, there's rules for duels, rules for extra points for a pin in the national tournament, things like that. And it is not something that just is there a wrestling scoring for dummies book out there? Because I can't find one, and maybe we could author one because it's a system that is constantly being tweaked and changed, and not all tweaks and changes are good. NCAA men's basketball, we started off our broadcast with Caitlin Clark discussion. You would probably find it maybe hasn't caught up yet, but it's catching up. I'd rather watch a women's game. I was watching South Carolina versus Georgia before coming in today. The men's, everybody goes pro after a year. They transfer all the time. I can't keep track of who's where. If it didn't say Indiana on the front, I wouldn't even know who's out there. But I can tell you the starting 5 of at least 3 or 4 women's teams. I don't think I can do that for the men's teams right now. So it's all about education and motivation. Are you motivated to learn all these point systems and rules and strategies? And it's hard.
I think how I'd answer that, Danny, is ask them what their sport is. So if you say football, well, there's a lot of ways to win. You could be like the Hawkeyes and try to win 12-10, or you could punt to try to win, right? Or you could be like USC and try to win, 72-65. In basketball, you guys remember Grinnell from a couple of years ago was like on record pace because they'd pass it up, shoot a 3, go down. That's how they played. Well, in wrestling, you could win by points, or you could pin somebody. And that pin is, I think, what makes the sport so special. It is the ultimate equalizer. You see guys who are dominating and winning, and all of a sudden they get a little out of position and their shoulders are on the mat and they're pinned, and in a matchup where they were winning have now just lost. Mm-hmm. And in another sport, you can't do that. There's not a 30-pointer, in college basketball. There's, you can only score 8 points at a time in football if you get the touchdown 2-point conversion. So I think that is the cool part about it, and what makes it so special.
I will say that if wrestling does point systems correctly, just before we hit the air today, Gaige and I were watching some Iowa versus Wisconsin, and if you learn the system, you realize if he gets a takedown with 3 seconds left, he goes into overtime and the momentum's on his side, and every second of every match has some significance in it seems like, whereas basketball's probably the worst with this. You can look at the clock and say, I got yard work to do. Well, there's only 2 minutes left of the game, and next thing you know, 25 minutes have passed because of all the timeouts and going out of bounds and all the clock stuff. But anyway, but you have to remember the 3-point takedown is a new rule. I think that has made getting a tech fall very easy. I don't know if it's really changed results of too many matches. Instead of winning 3-1, now they're winning 4-1. But getting a tech fall has become let them up, get another takedown. Those 20-4s add up a lot faster.
I think going back to your question too, depends on what you're sitting there watching. If you're watching the duels last week, I think we saw the biggest difference in the duel format versus individual format in the 3A 120 match of Pearson from Southeast Polk and Knight from Bettendorf. So it was we talked about this a couple weeks ago. It was that high-flying match where both guys were trying to throw each other. There's a bunch of points scored because they were trying to get 6 points or more for their team. You know, they just kind of let it fly. Well, Pearson won this 1-0 last night in a match where both guys wanted to be super technically sound, didn't want to make a mistake, but you're not really worried about the team points. You're worried about winning your match. So I think that's kind of what makes it fun too is, you know, what type of tournament are we talking?
All right, moving on to state wrestling. It happened this past week. What do you guys got?
Danny, we're going to let you go first. Okay. So
got nothing.
We have 3 big stories that Shane and I came up with. So I picked yours as a surprise to you for this episode. Nice. Okay. So here's your 3 big stories. You get to choose which one you think's the biggest. So Jeff Voss announced right after the tournament that he is stepping down as West Delaware head coach, and he won't be back to teach after coaching at West Delaware for almost the last 30 years. I think he's on year like 28 or 29. Okay, so there's an option. Drayshawn Ross pinned his way through the state tournament for Fort Dodge, was a champ. Only one of his matches made it to the second period, so just absolutely dominated. This third one's a little bit of a different storyline, but very important in Iowa. Cade Bloom of Roland Story is a 3-time champ. He's never lost a championship because he was banned from wrestling last year after a hazing incident in his wrestling room with another student, and he was booed loudly after winning his title yesterday. So what are you picking as, you know, biggest story of those 3 big stories?
I gotta go with Coach. I only say that because coaches have so much influence on people, and to have that void in your school and your program could be felt for years to come. So
I knew you were going to pick that.
Oh.
So I had a follow-up question with it, and this is right up Shane's alley too. What's the best way to go out as a coach? Because we just had Mark Cherry retire, who you know very, very well. What is the best way to go out? So West Delaware, Coach Voss, solid year, but it wasn't like a dominant West Delaware year that they've had in the past. You know, would you rather go out winning a bunch of stuff as a coach of many years? Or would you rather, you know, maybe have one good kid? Like, what's the best way to go out? What do you guys think?
This conversation is kind of up my alley because I went through it. Had a very talented long jumper in my track coaching days, and I was only in my second year of coaching, and I told my counterpart for the girls team, Paula Blevin, I said, this might be my last meet. And she looked at me, and I mean, as far as the team goes, things were going great that year. We got 6 people to state and had some place winners and stuff. And I go, she's like wondering, did I hit my head on something or something? I go, no, but if he's a state champ today, then it's not going to get better than that. And I'm going to go out on, as I coached the state champ, and that's all I really can hope for. So I was going to leave that way. It turned out he got second. He lost by 1 inch in the long jump, and I coached for 4 more years after that. So I would try to coach a state champ if I could, and if I couldn't, I would probably, if I was wrestling coach, walk to the center of the mat, take off my shoes regardless of whether they were wrestling shoes or loafers or whatever, and kind of just wave goodbye and walk off.
What about you, Danny?
I'm going to stay neutral on this one.
I think for me, I would rather coach as my last group, a group of kids, that were special, regardless of results. When you can kind of walk away with a senior class that really meant, they obviously all mean something to you, but there's just those groups that really mean something. I think if you could walk away with that one, I think that makes a difference, because if you win, then you're like, man, maybe I could come back one more year, and if you lose, you're like, I got to come back one more year because I got to go out on a better note. Yeah. Like, I think as a coach, it's never gonna, you could just keep going on and on forever. So I'm just gonna go that other route. But yeah, okay, interesting pick there, Danny. I didn't know if you go with one of the other two.
I'll put a little basketball perspective on it. Bobby Knight coached for as many years as he did because he never coached what he wanted to coach, which was the perfect game, and therefore, which is unattainable in basketball. That means you'd have to make every shot and hold the other team to 0. And that kind of passion drove him to do what he did as a coach, but yet he was striving for something that really doesn't exist. So you do get caught in those little traps of, well, we weren't perfect, so I'll coach another year. Or we made the Sweet 16, but we didn't make the Final Four, so I'll coach another year, that kind of thing. And that has nothing to do with contracts and commercial deals and anything like that. It's just the perspective of what can be achieved or attained versus what can't be. So that's an interesting question, Gaige.
I had an honorable mention for you, Danny, which was the Brent Slade versus Damari Mickle stare down at heavyweight that I talked about earlier. Yeah. But I already mentioned it, so I threw a different one on there.
All right. You guys got anything else from state?
I'll get the ball rolling. I think one of the big stories for state was we had to do a little double check, and I'm glad we did. But I thought for a second there that no Iowa recruit this year had won a state title this year.
That's something.
And it turned out that Voinovich, I forgot about him, but he's not a native Iowan either.
He just moved in this year.
Yeah,
right?
He just moved in this year. And I don't know if there's a story there or not, but we did a little talking before the broadcast started, and we'll throw it out to you listeners. Maybe you can email us. We think Iowa is the only wrestling state that has 3 legit top 20 programs. And when you dilute all of that Iowa talent to those 3 universities, plus the Grandviews, plus the co-college and all that stuff, that's pretty hard for that talent pool to always emerge at either Iowa City or, not everybody's looking for Iowa City. Not everybody's looking for Cedar Falls. And it was just, there was already panic on the message boards about, Iowa's down to recruiting guys that can't even be the state champ or not. No, that's neither here nor there, but it's just something that kind of struck me, not in a wrong way, just kind of struck me as interesting. What about you, Gaige?
So before you do your other two, I actually just, during our technical difficulties, I was looking through some things on Facebook, and somebody after the state tournament last night posted something on like one of those groups that said, what's the best way to get my kid looked at or recruited by the University of Iowa to wrestle? And there was real comments and there was sarcastic comments and all sorts of things like there. But one comment that got a ton of likes and whatnot was have them finish second at the state tournament. And so, something that got noticed that a lot of Iowa's recruits didn't do well. And it actually made me think of a video I just watched yesterday about the difference as you go up in levels and talent. Like the gap is really thin as you go up. Mm-hmm. And, there's so many guys who are 4-time champs or 3-time champs that go to college and they don't pan out. And so I don't think not winning last night is going to be detrimental to anybody's success. But, we saw Ben Keeter get roughed up, pretty good by, Greg Kirkfleet. And so, I think it just showed these guys aren't at the top of the mountain yet. They still have some work to do.
My second big story, and Gaige, you have a tie into this. New London has a tie into this. Is just the Southeast Polk dominance in Class 3A. They had the thing clinched before Saturday.
Yeah.
And you said that they went on to receive the second amount, or not receive, but earn the second most points ever at the state tournament. And it just got me thinking, what has Southeast Polk done in the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years to become the mecca for high school sports in the state of Iowa these days? If we've talked a lot about football here, so they've had Caden Proctor, they've had Xavier Wampka, they've had Abu Sama, they've had other Division I players on that football team, and they're back-to-back state champs. I mean, Bettendorf went through kind of a football dominance for a long time, but now it's Southeast Polk in wrestling and football. Just it went just like that. They went from a typical big school to the place to be, and I just wonder, did they get? I know they got brand new facilities and stuff, but anyway, I think that's a big story, because I don't see with the way things are going this stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, so Osage went back-to-back. Don Bosco won their 6th straight. And then, to your point, Southeast Polk won their 5th title in the last 10 years, scoring 221.5 points, second most ever.
Mm-hmm. So you said it's the year of the wolf, and I agree. It could be the year of the ram as well. And we got to give a shout-out for my last big story, Loudon Huizenga, Waco.
Waco, yeah.
Yeah, second place, 190, Class 1A. Some research by Matt Levins of the Hawkeye tells us that he was the closest Waco's had for a state champ since 2005. Eric Davis won the state title in 2005 for Waco. But shout out to Waco for representing Southeast Iowa with Loudon Huizenga.
What I want to know is, how did Rowdy Neighbor do?
I was just informed by we need an NIL deal with Rowdy Neighbor. Rowdy Neighbor's my guy, and Gaige just told me he was a state champ this year. So let's jump on the Rowdy Neighbor NIL paraphernalia. I'm ready to wear a polo shirt now.
Let's do it.
Gaige,
what do you got?
Another Southeast Iowa guy that made the finals was Russell Coyle from Columbus Junction, Winfield Mount Union. And he lost to Munson of Osage. And I thought in that match, that kind of goes to like the gap of there were some guys that just were different than the other guys in the tournament. And that Munson of Osage was just on another level of everybody in that weight class in 2A. But here's my top 3 storylines, and I'll go third to first. So my third one, Demarion and Drayshawn Ross. Well, maybe this should be second. I'm going to come back to that one. Coy Davison beat Carter Freeman, and Max Magana lost to Hempstead from Carlisle, both in 3A. Those were 2 3-time champs who lost in the semis, didn't even make the finals, who could have been 4-time champs. Max Magana and Carter Freeman could have won their 4th title, both in kind of surprising fashion in really close matches. Kind of in a devastating way. Max Magana hadn't lost as an upperclassman. He was the one that went from Columbus Catholic over to Waterloo East this year, and so those are pretty pretty crazy matches that got a lot of attention. So then I'll go second for Demarion and Drayshawn Ross, our brothers. One's a sophomore and one's a senior. Both won titles in 3A for Fort Dodge. One at 175, one at 215. The sophomore winning his second, the senior winning his first. So I thought that was cool that you had a brother combo that both won titles. My number one, I thought story that would make a really cool story. Jarrett Ruse of Sheldon South O'Brien at 190 pounds was a champion. And he had a brother who was also a great wrestler for Sheldon, home of the Tom and Terry Brands, the Brands brothers, who had passed away. And his dad was the head coach there of Sheldon. And his dad did not realize this, but when he looked into the pocket of his suit, because you see, pretty much all the coaches wear suits for the finals. I mean, that's a pretty common thing for Iowa high school wrestling championships, that his brother's, whatever you call that, the program of his funeral was in his jacket pocket. And Jarrett and his dad had talked about, his dad informed him, he's like, the last time I wore this suit was at your brother's funeral, and this next time is you wrestling, a state championship. And it was kind of like the vibe of, like, he's here with us now.
Wow.
So,
yeah, powerful.
Yeah, that was, I don't know. You could see he was, had kind of been crying in the interview a little bit. It just meant a lot to him. So I thought, that was my biggest story. I thought was really cool. I talked about the Pearson overnight, but I had some honorable mentions, I guess. Drew Ayala got third. That 120 weight class we talked about, he's going to Iowa, maybe the toughest class, weight class you could ever see.
What school is he from?
So he's a Fort Dodger also.
Oh, okay. Which
Which is crazy, as many Fort Dodge guys we've already talked about in this episode, that they didn't win it or even come close. Mm-hmm. That just shows you how good some of those schools are. Clayton Purell from Mount Vernon went undefeated. He's a 106 senior. That's not something you see very often. Wants to go be a genetic engineer, and I don't know, I was listening to an interview for him. That was crazy. There's a couple out-of-state guys who came in and did some damage. So one out-of-state guy, Nico DeSalvo. So my cousin Sam is kind of like his main assistant is how it works. So he's a 106-pounder, won the title. He came from Nevada. So in a lot of these other states, you can wrestle in 8th grade in high school. And so he would be one of those. From Ames, Damari Mickle was a runner-up. He was a finalist who came from out-of-state. But I think one of the best matches of out-of-state guys, other than you already mentioned Voinovich, so I won't go into him. So Lyndon, I've been working on this name, guys. One of them was wrestling for his first title. He got third last year. His older brother Cam had won 2 titles. So Carson Doolittle just moved in from North Carolina. He was a 4-time North Carolina champ. He had wrestled in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And his older brother was a 4-time champ in North Carolina before moving up to Iowa his senior year. And so he ended up beating one of them. Carson Doolittle did. But I don't know, just some cool storylines of guys who are successful in other states coming to Iowa and making the finals. I thought that was neat. And hoping that we do this podcast for years to come, but you got to watch the freshman champs because they're the ones that, could be the next 4-timer. And I'd say second to Rowdy Neighbor in best name of the tournament, Gaige Surgeon of Eddyville Blakes for Fremont was a freshman champ. So he's definitely up there as well.
So, Danny, you better get on the phone. We got NIL deals with Rowdy Neighbor, and Carly Simon owes us a check.
Yes, she does.
Just so nobody forgot that from 2 weeks ago. But the
Gaige Surgeon now.
Yeah, Gaige Surgeon. Hey,
put him on
give
the
us
list.
a call. Gaige, just the 106 gentleman that you referred to, I think I saw a snippet of a interview with him, and he was alluding to the fact that he was a senior, and this was the first time he was even close to weighing 106. He'd wrestled at 82.
Oh, from Mount Vernon?
Yeah, he was basically an 82-pounder wrestling at 106 when he first started. So he's quote-unquote growing into his body now at 106 as an 18-year-old kid. I wonder how many, if you went through the program, how many 106-pounders are even upperclassmen. That's pretty rare.
Yeah, I don't know. Corbin Rise was maybe one other story to throw out. I mean, you could probably go on and on, but just the brothers who've been in finals. His brother was the one who, I mentioned this at some point in one of our episodes, was in the finals and lost every single time. I believe all 4 years made the finals. He was a champ for Logan Magnolia at 144. So just some cool storylines. And Danny, I know you love that little area up there by Old Wine. Starmont had a champ. We talked about him earlier. Moeller of Starmont was a champion at 150 pounds. We've talked a lot about Fort Dodge, Southeast Polk. Waverly Shell Rock is kind of that traditional powerhouse that we didn't really hear much of, but they did have a champ. Diaz won for them at 150. 2A and 1A. those top 3 or 4 teams, maybe 5 teams, are just different. Because Union LaPorte City threw out several champs as well. Bonsack and Olson won at 120 and 150 pounds. But, yeah, just some really good wrestling. I thought it was one of the better finals nights that I remember in the last 12 years. Just some great matches and great storylines and everything like that.
All right. Well, Shane, you had a chance to talk to the athletic director at New London, Emily Parks.
Yeah, Emily was a former student of mine, and she has decided to, I think, probably take a hiatus from being the athletic director. She's going to have another child. And before things get too chaotic with having children and whatnot, I said, we need to get an interview for WrestleCast, and she was willing enough and gracious enough to do that for us. Had some really interesting thoughts about subjects we've been talking about all year, but we got a fresh AD perspective this time. So I think people will enjoy her thoughts on that.
All right. Thanks for setting up the clip. And this is Emily Parks, the athletic director of New London.
This is the WrestleCast at New London Middle School and High School. Talking to Emily Parks, New London's current AD. Emily, we're going to ask you some questions on what it's like to be an AD. What is the biggest challenge for putting on a wrestling meet?
One of them would be finding officials for them, because there is such a big shortage in officials in all sports. But I feel like mainly because in wrestling, because now that girls is sanctioned in Iowa, the limited amount of officials we had are split between girls and boys now. So that would be one of them. And then just making sure like your track wrestling is all set up and beforehand, so you're not, your meets in there and all of the weigh-in stuff and everything's figured out, the matches are figured out and stuff. And then you hope no problem goes with track wrestling, because then you have to go to their sport line and figure it out. So those would be the main 2 that I think are the biggest challenges for wrestling meets.
Just in a nutshell, what is track wrestling? It's a computer program, right?
Yeah, so track wrestling is literally what all of like information for wrestling is. Like every single match is put in there. Like that's how it's scored. Now it's not on paper. It's all on track wrestling. So each school has to log in every time that they have a meet, and then it automatically uploads, and it's kind of like quick stats or bound would be for other sports. That's what track is for wrestling. And it's used like high school. I mean, it starts with little kids, like little kids wrestling tournaments use it all the way up through college and stuff. So it's a pretty big thing.
So, Emily, you brought up something about girls wrestling and refereeing. What have you seen in just 3 years about girls wrestling? New London has tried to get a program. Do you find yourself to be kind of a marketing person now?
In a sense. I mean, when we first found out that girls was going to be sanctioned in Iowa, I held a meeting, just to see if there was any interest, or, if we needed to look further into building a program, or even sharing a program with another school. I mean, there was a little interest, not much. I feel like starting a program in the high school right now would be kind of hard. It'll be more of the elementary and middle school, and then our program would build. So I think it's awesome that it's sanctioned now, but it'll take a while for, I think, here to, for like a varsity program here to really explode. But there's a bunch of schools in our area that have varsity programs, or junior high even. So
yeah, what we're finding through our research and our observation is that girls wrestling at the state level is really starting to take off. Mm-hmm. Maybe in Southeast Iowa hasn't quite picked up yet, but we see a little bit more interest. We know that in one of our interviews and podcasts that led to 3 girls going out. So just from your standpoint, what would you say girls wrestling will need as far as time to kind of catch up? 10 years, 12 years? Your thoughts?
I feel like it'll be sooner than that, because of how much it took off in a year, being sanctioned. Like, I think within the next 5 years, we'll see it being huge everywhere. Because those junior high programs that are starting now will be in the high school by 5 years. So if all those girls stick it out, then each school that has a junior high program right now will have a varsity program within the next couple of years. So I think it's well within 5 years, for it to be just as big as boys, and hopefully that is what we get to for them.
Just for some disclosure here, Emily used to be one of my students, and she went to Cardinal Stritch University and majored in sports administration. Do you have your master's, or you're working on it, True?
I do not have my master's.
Well, get on it.
Well, maybe eventually.
But also, full disclosure, Emily is taking a hiatus from the administration aspect of sports. She's going to have a child here pretty soon, so she's going to take a break from New London athletic directing, but I'm sure she'll be back at some point in some capacity for us. But Emily, could you just talk about being an athletic director in general? Is wrestling kind of one of the easier programs to manage, or is it one of the more difficult programs to manage?
I feel like wrestling is its own category. It's not really difficult. I'd say not that I've ever had any issues with fans anywhere, but they're just, more involved in what's going on in the match or the meet or whatever, more vocal during those times. But our program here has been very successful for as long as, anyone can remember. And we've never really had any issues. It's just, it's a beast of its own, but I think in a really good way.
Okay, Emily, can you tell our listeners, they can't see it, but you're wearing a very special T-shirt. I didn't put the math together. What T-shirt are you wearing?
I'm wearing my dad's class of 1971 T-shirt today.
So just to explain to our readers why that's significant, we have Gaige Burden at New London. He is going to wrestle tonight. We'll see how that goes for our broadcast, but he's wrestling. He's wrestling for New London. What was Mr. Parks? There's some significance there.
Yeah, so my dad was the very first New London state placer for wrestling in 1971. He placed third his senior year of high school, and he was the first one to ever place here at New London.
So that's significant for those of you who have never roamed the halls of New London. We have an entire wall set aside for New London place winners, and to be the first is a historical achievement. So, like you said, I didn't put the class of 71 and the math together for that. So that's pretty cool. Emily, what is your future plans? I know the child's going to come first, but surely in the back of your mind you have something set aside or something you would like to accomplish here in the next few years?
Yeah, well, I am taking a step down from the AD position, but I will still be coaching softball here at New London, the head coach, and then I plan to still help with volleyball and everything like that. So sports-wise, I'll still be involved here at New London, which I'm very thankful for. But career-wise, I would hope to eventually, once my kids grow up a little bit and aren't so little, get back into the AD business, but the schedule right now just doesn't seem very fitting for a mom with two very little kids. So, yeah, I hope to get back in it eventually in life.
I'm sure you can share some stories. People who listen to the WrestleCast have heard my stories. What has been the biggest challenge of being an AD? It looks like a job that you walk into and you make sure the scoreboard's running and all things like that, but there's always something that pops up. What's been the biggest challenge for you?
I think there's multiple, but I think, just taking the heat for different types of situations, you know, that you might not even be aware of what happened, or, you know, something happens at a different, in away school when your school is playing, and situation happens and you're not there. You know, you don't have to go to every away game. And something happens, then you have to deal with it, not knowing every single detail like you would want to, and kind of being blindsided. But I mean, that doesn't happen very often, but other than that, I would say, like, the biggest challenge would be, say, an official. I know I say official, like, the officials, it's not, if one says they can't make it last minute, trying to fill that spot is difficult because there is so many shortages.
Okay, Emily, we're both looking at the clock, and you got duties to attend to, so I'm going to let you go after this one question. We talked earlier about when the WrestleCast first began, we talked about mega tournaments and 32 teams showing up at one place, and that's important, true, and I see the pros and cons of that. From your standpoint, little tournaments, and I put quotes around the little, events like the Jeremy Folk, your biggest challenge now is to probably recruit teams back.
Correct. Yeah. So from when I went to high school here, I remember it being, you know, at least a 14-team tournament, you know, and I graduated in 2015. So not that long ago, but, yeah, we're down to like 7, including us. Mm-hmm. So, you know, losing half of that, we're not able, with the 7 teams, we're not able to fill many of the brackets full. You know, we have a couple round robin, like some weight classes with 3 kids in it, some weight classes with 4, because not every team that comes brings someone in every single weight. So, you know, we're not filling the brackets, and it's really sad because, you know, these small tournaments are like how our booster club makes, you know, money and for like fundraisers and stuff for our kids, or, you know, just we don't get to host that many wrestling events here at New London. We get maybe one quad every year, but that's like our other main one, is a Jeremy Folk, and not having many teams or not having many spectators is a very big challenge. So every year I try to like send out an email just saying, hey, our tournament's the first weekend of December every year. Please bring your teams. We take JV too, so we can put some JV matches in there. But just, it used to be, you know, that weekend was, for at least Southeast Iowa, was, you know, where everyone wanted to bring for the Jeremy Folk their teams. But now it's, with all these different tournaments coming and becoming big, everyone wants to go there to kind of stand out and see what they can do at these big tournaments. So,
yeah, every tournament has several stories, and I was an AD for the Jeremy Folk. We had 14 teams, and it was a long event, and people were kind of like, hey, we got to get the holiday stroll. And, you know, and people want to go to that. So, small town issues are legitimate issues. So, just kind of wanted to bring that to light and see your perspective on that. So, I know you got to get to a basketball game, and we want to thank you from the WrestleCast for your time. Thank you, Emily Parks.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me.
Okay. That's Emily Parks, AD for New London. For now, she'll be back though. So, this is Shane Barron for WrestleCast. Thank you.
All right, that was Athletic Director of New London, Emily Parks. Thank you for that interview, Shane. And we're going to take a break with Helmerson Chiropractic, and we'll be right back. Helmerson Chiropractic in New London offers services customized to treat your needs. Whether you need relief from chronic pain, sports injuries, headaches, carpal tunnel syndrome, fibromyalgia, vertigo, or just overall aches and pains, Dr. Kyle Helmerson can customize a treatment plan for you. It's time you enjoyed a pain-free life. Contact Helmerson Chiropractic in New London at 319-217-9425. And welcome back to the WrestleCast. I'm Danny Davis along with Gaige Gill and Shane Barron. We've got another point counterpoint, and this time, Gaige, you've got an idea for college duel changes.
Yeah, so this would be a change to dual scoring, only in duels, and this would hopefully promote more action, more offense.
All right. You want to go first?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so here's the proposal. If you lose but get a takedown or near fall point in the match, you still get a point for your team. So even in a loss. So if you're down 14-2, you get a takedown, your team still gets 1 team point. If you don't get near falls or takedowns, you get 0. So a decision would be 4, a major would be 5, a tech would be 6, and a pin 7 in this format.
Shane?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I like scoring, and I think wrestling does have to address scoring issues. They're very good on their feet, very good defensively. But like I said earlier, it took me a long time just to figure out what they're doing now. I'm too old to be learning new stuff. So the 7-point pin, I think it would get a lot of kids to get that near fall or takedown. They would be doing stupid stuff at the end to try to avoid.
All right. Well, thank you, Shane. And before we get out of here, guys, you had some college updates for us.
Yeah, I can go first if you want, Shane.
Yeah, I'll just follow along. I got some updates from some of our local wrestlers that we've been following.
So at the state tournament last night, Norwalk's Tyler Harper won a rematch against Iowa City West foe from last year, and he will be, as far as I know, Little Rock's first Iowa state champ recruit. So Arkansas Little Rock's really coming onto the scene here in college wrestling. So I believe Tyler Harper will be the first state champ from Iowa to ever go there and wrestle. So the pipeline to Arkansas has begun.
Well, the pipeline to Arkansas might continue because I have some notes here about Arkansas Little Rock. They kicked Southern Illinois University, which features our Lopez brothers. They handled them pretty easily at 33-6 in a recent duel. So is UALR going to be the Penn State of that size school? I don't know, but let's look for that. The Lopez brothers kind of had a rough week, not too horrible, but Marcel is now 13-10 this year, and Dom 11-11. And Dom is one of those guys that we kind of alluded to earlier in that he didn't win a state title ever, but he was always in the top 4, and he's handling his true freshman year for Southern Illinois pretty good. So, does the state title give a true indication of what they're going to do in college? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Some earlier results that kind of might be a little stale by now, but I think we do need to mention that the Iowa State Cyclones beat UNI 27-14 a little while ago. Things that stood out there was that Evan Frost, Casey Swiderski, David Carr, younger Bastida, all won by tech fall over UNI. So those 4 wrestlers are kind of showing maybe a glimpse into the NCAA tournament that they're the type of wrestlers that can get bonus points for you. Best match of that particular duel was probably Anthony Eshmendia. Probably butchered his name, but Anthony E, we'll call him. He's ranked 9th. He beat Cale Happel from Lisbon, who's now, he's at UNI. He was ranked 9th. Cale Happel was ranked 6th, and coincidentally, the score ended up being 9-6. So let's look for those 2 wrestlers in the NCAAs. And 184, UNI's best hope for NCAA title, Parker Kekison, still ranked number 1. He tech-falled over, I think he was state titleist last year. Gaige, help me out. Tate Nocturborn. Forget what school, but I remember him last year a little bit, or maybe the year before. But tech falled him 20-4. So UNI probably going to be somewhere ranked in that 12-16 area when the final tallies get made. Cyclones have a definitive or a definite chance of being a top 4 team on the podium. Penn State's obviously number 1. They handled Iowa very easily, kind of disappointingly so for if you're an Iowa fan. But they're obviously number 1. And then that Missouri, Iowa, Oklahoma State, ISU, you can maybe throw Michigan in there. Who's going to be 2, 3, and 4 on the podium for that? That's That's going to be a toss-up, it looks like right now.
Yeah, so one thing I thought was interesting, going back to the state tournament, I was kind of saving these. So the ties between the college game and some of these high school coaches. So both Wilton's coach and Wilton's coach and Don Bosco's coach are former NCAA medalists, which I thought was interesting. And there's 2 Don Bosco guys who will probably go on to wrestle in college that are brothers. One will for sure. The Canucks were both champs. So I don't know. Just you see some of those pipelines, started between a school and a college. But I watched the Iowa meet here today, and they looked really good. But once again, they didn't wrestle a great opponent. Wisconsin is ranked in the top 25, but I think we know there's a difference between the top 10 and the rest of the field, and probably even like the top 5. I mean, Iowa State and Nebraska are pretty dang good teams, and Iowa, I think, just matched up well with them. But Iowa did not throw Drake Ayala out there at 125, and I think that was to maybe help him with seeding-wise at Big Tens. So they threw out a true freshman, Cruz, who looked really good, just couldn't finish shots on third-ranked Barnett. So that was one of Iowa's only losses. The other loss was Caliendo lost a really good match, 13-11 to Hamidi. And so, we'll see how that goes in the rematch. But Teskey won by tech fall. Woods got a pin. Ratchie won a ranked matchup by decision. Franek got a major. Gabe Arnold got the nod. You could tell he hasn't wrestled a lot of matches. He kind of ran out of gas lately. But he beat a ranked guy, legal. And Gabe Arnold stays undefeated for his Iowa career. Everybody out there, don't panic. He's not going to probably be in the lineup, but he can still redshirt. Glacier won a major decision. His only loss this year, still just to the Penn State wrestler. Bradley Hill, who's ranked, had a major decision. So, I don't know. Goes back to what we said a couple weeks ago. They've wrestled some teams that aren't the best, and they've looked really good. They've got the bonus points. But can they win the big matches when it matters most? I don't know. Oklahoma State next Sunday, a week from today. That'll probably tell us who the true number 2 in the nation is.
I was just before we get out of here, I was just kind of watching some of the message boards after Iowa lost to, not only Penn State, but they lost to Michigan. And there's so many people calling for the Brands brothers' heads. Here we are. We've got, the second best coaching duo in the country right now. And for some people, that's not enough. What are you going to do? You might be able to change a member of the wrestling crew here and there, but to say just throw them both out and bring 2 other people in, that's just sounds silly.
I don't know. Ask Nebraska football program how that works when you fire good coaches. It gives you 10 years of bad luck.
Yes, it does. All right, guys. Well, thank you, and we hope you enjoyed listening. And we got someone out there that enjoys doing a workout while they listen to the WrestleCast.
Yeah, I'm gonna test him right now to see if he's holding true to his word. Steve Gibson from Iowa City, if you're out there, hope you had a good workout and enjoyed the WrestleCast this week. He said that he listens to WrestleCast as he works out on Monday mornings. So, Steve, you better still be with us at this point.
Like that. All right, thank you for listening. I'm Danny Davis with Shane Barron and Gaige Gill. We'll talk to you next week.
That's a show.
Great job, everybody.
That's it for this week's edition of The WrestleCast. For questions on advertising on our program, or if you'd just like to drop us a line, you can do so at sportscastmedia@outlook.com. Follow Sportscast Media on Facebook, or go to our website at www.sportscastmedia.com. The WrestleCast is a presentation of the Sportscast Media Network.